It's been 6 days since whatever in the hell it was happened. The net's been abuzz with all sorts of videos of things. That's all I can really call them. It only took a day or two to start putting the pieces together, and a few conspiracy folks speculated at first what the hell was going on, and then the information started coming in very slowly. But once you start putting it together, it was quite weird. Realizing that everything we saw was out of video games, and exclusively so, made everybody uneasy and made them question things a lot. The huge spaceships that seemed to appear in orbit and out of orbit that came down to the planet, along with inside the atmosphere, things just kind of appeared, got everybody a bit on edge because we're all pretty well versed on what those things can do, and it makes them a little nervous. Nobody really had time to think about it now, though, as scattered around the world, things are, well, watching the videos, I was holding two breathing examples of what the hell just happened. The two goblin females, Ruby and Hazel, watched and asked me questions. They seemed to get smarter by the minute as they asked and received what answers I could give them. They're aware of what they were before, surprisingly, but don't act like chickens, and brought up the fact that they used to be hens, and that's when I thought about it. I thought about how goblins had been depicted in all sorts of media, and these two seemed calm and collected and not at all like I thought. Not only this, but their bodies were not like, well, you would see in a game. It's clear that this reality has changed them at least a little bit. In fact, looking at them close, if they weren't green, I might actually mistake them for halflings. Then I wondered what's happening in areas that have a lot of cockerels around. Of course, here in the US, we kind of use an abbreviated version of that word, or we just call it rooster. But seemingly 2 out of 12 of my hens are now goblin females made me wonder, what about places like Hawaii where cockfighting is actually common, or Mexico or something like that? I started searching and it didn't take long to find. The videos are being posted faster than anyone could possibly censor any of them for being too violent or adult. Looking, we could see that the highly populated areas are where chaos reigned, as multiple creatures seemed to emerge, many of them just kind of standing there, not knowing what the hell is going on. But the areas that had a lot of cockerels? Oh, God. The goblin males acted exactly like you'd expect, and they even had kind of a gross look, but they still looked a lot more human than you would think. The murder that they caused, the assaults, the destruction, and the theft, obviously, for just to do it. Just why? What, destruction for destruction's sake? It's all I could think of. I couldn't watch much of it, as it twisted my stomach and boiled my blood at the same time. The two girls actually curled up tight at the violence and turned away from it. I actually had to hold them both until they stopped shaking. I turned it off, and instead started looking into things that were much more local, as it's clear that I should be ready for anything, and it's better to know what's around me. I could see videos, CCTV videos, showed other species changing. Cattle becoming minotaurs, different type of canines becoming werewolves, dolphins and sharks morphing into different types of werewolves, pigs around the world turning into orcs, but there seemed to be a different design depending on where you are on the planet. If you were over in the east, it seemed as though they were just big fat pigmen that seemed to want to do things that were very, very bad. Yet over in the US, it seemed as though they were, well, everybody knows what they would turn into in that game. Big, wide, broad, tall, with the big tusks. Yet they seemed more intelligent. It was odd. I watched one video as a deer became another type of anthropomorphic thing. I didn't even know what it was. Even the birds began to change into mythical birds, at least a few of them. And of course, different reptiles changed into not only dragons and wyverns, but dragonoids as well. This would be amazing if it wasn't so freaking horrifying. What the hell is going on? As I readied weapons and gear, the girls kept looking up other videos and witness accounts. I could take a sigh of relief that the certain things seemed to be regional. For example, only true dragons seem to come primarily out of Indonesia. The pandas over in China, if they changed, they became kind of big, tall, talking pandas. I wonder if they actually do some kung fu. It seemed as though India had some sort of tiger-ish personnel going. That was really weird. I'm not sure what the hell that was. Though, what really was interesting, at least on this side of the pond, was there seemed to be Phoenix starting to come out. But they weren't coming from Phoenix, of all things. But no. Instead, there seemed to be two different distinct types. One from the Great Lakes and one from Mexico. We're still trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Seeing all this was, well, for lack of a better term, bad. This is bad, right? This is bad? However, what was next was going to be horrifying. After only 5 days, these creatures began to show their abilities. Thankfully, a phoenix doesn't actually grow bigger than about a parrot size, but it can still burst into flames and burn through a cage if it wants. The dragons began to learn to breathe fire and made everybody very nervous at this. Thankfully, they seemed very territorial. This would have set the entire world into a panic if not for one thing. Humans changed too. They didn't have time to worry about that. As it turned out, somewhere between 9 and 15% of the human population had begun to change as well. This was odd and creepy, and everybody was weirded out around the world. Across the world, men and women and even children began to change shape and color. Many of them turned pale, while others turned blue, purple, or even green. Even their ears began to grow, and some even began to grow horns. Nobody knew what the hell was going on. Frantically, at that point, I was already calling my siblings, but no one picked up, and I actually believed the worst had happened. I left messages for them to contact me and to show up if they need help. I mean, I got plenty of room in this big house. I began to worry about their safety so much that I basically had a mini breakdown, and I simply just dropped onto the floor, leaning up against the couch. To my surprise, my two new associates, the little girls, well, I shouldn't call them that because they're not exactly girls. They tried to comfort me as I slowly crawled out of myself and got my head on straight. I realized this as they grabbed a hold of me and I felt them grabbing on and just giving me a tight hug, waiting for me to come back to my senses. Once I was back to myself, I thanked them very, very much by giving them a quick hug, and they both laughed at this, and they started giving off a strange giggle. I worry about that giggle. So we simply got up, went back to the computer, and started watching more videos, but as we went through, it was beginning to be more and more clear that human beings were not just changing into one different type of species, but different subspecies. A bunch of people actually shrank and got very, very stout in the way they were. Very wide, very broad. Male, female, it didn't really matter. But when they did, their muscles got scary big. Seriously, I look at one of their arms and they're almost as big as my torso. And that's just the girls. It was around this time that the information leaks started to make sense. As it turns out, the government can, in fact, screw everything up. While experimenting inside Area 51 with some sort of quantum energy, whatever it is they won't tell us, the folks at CERN were actually conducting an experiment of their own, something that would have some sort of strange burst of energy across the planet. If nothing else was going on, except for regular people living their regular lives, nobody would even notice. You would think just these two would be the problem, but no, it wasn't just them. Something radiated out of Mount Hayes in Alaska, something very powerful. Now, was this some sort of resonance that came from one of the other two? Nobody knows and nobody's talking. But there was some sort of overload also in Russia that didn't help matters as it seemed to soak the area, some sort of really strong pulse. But the real punch, out of all of it, came from Antarctica of all places. The sensors say that's where it all started. The details are scattered at best and very, very sketchy, but it seems that all those separate factors at the same time destabilize something under the ice. That's when it burst, and it flowed across the planet, causing the distortion, the one that we felt. I actually remember seeing it out of my peripheral vision as it came up, kind of like a shockwave. This distortion of reality caused some sort of collective consciousness to coalesce and bring items from video games into reality. Why video games? Who the hell knows? Although this explained how giant spaceships can suddenly appear and cause massive amount of damage over an unprepared world. In particular, the giant squid still left a giant imprint when it crashed down. We have other ones where places are just radiated to all hell, where ships came down. Another one, there was this strange Bulvis ship that fired God knows how many bursts of molten plasma that seemed to be guided, of all things, into major cities, and then used some sort of beam to start cutting the place up. It's like it was trying to excavate things. And it just got worse from there. Thankfully, one of the other ships got a broadside on it, and I found it funny that what looked like something from 40K got up real close and then just lit them up. Literally sent them crashing towards the ground, but before they landed, poof, they disappeared. Who or whatever is in control of things down below the southern pole was able to limit things to a single fantasy game. I don't know how, but they made all the rest of them seem to dip out of reality. All I can say to that is, wow. They picked a really weird one. I mean, I'm not a fan. But then again, I think about all the other games there could be out there, and things could be worse. A lot worse. As I look over at my copy of Dead Souls 2. That was around the time my family began to show up and are surprised that I have 2 additional mouths to feed. Granted, they're small mouths, but I don't mind the extra work with 2 extra, but the side comments as the girls came running out in just my t-shirts, and only my t-shirts, got some interesting comments from everybody. So interesting that I had to tell them if they don't mind their manners, they can leave. As it turns out, I'm not the only one with surprises. My older brother and his wife have actually turned into, well, pale-skinned, I have no idea, with silver hair. Their kids are still human, though, although they look over at their parents and are almost looking at them like, who the hell are these people? One of my nieces has actually changed into a red color. I mean, solid red. Her skin is red color, and she grew horns of all things. And now I have a nephew that can conjure orbs. Orbs! He held out his hands. He thought it was funny. I look over, one of them's so bright I can't even look at the damn thing. And the other one's so dark I keep thinking it's going to have its own strong gravitational field and suck me in, so I don't even want to get close. He thinks it's cool. He thinks it's funny. And I just had to tell him, hey, not in the house. Okay. I had to kick him outside once when he started conjuring. With enough resources to keep going for a good long time, we began to swap stories about what we'd seen. We talk actually into the night, but we end up not sleeping all that well. Just as we're starting to bed down, we hear something screaming outside, actually screaming, and I have to tell everybody to turn on the outside lights. I had set up a whole bunch of floodlights, and they illuminated something running through the trees. It looked human, or is it humanoid? But it looked like it was carrying something. I didn't know what it was. That is when we heard a female voice scream. And it wasn't coming from the creature we could see. No, it was coming from the darkness of the night, deep in the woods. I looked close. I could see a few flashlights out there, but I didn't know what was going on. Grabbing my weapon and a very powerful flashlight, I ran to see what the hell was wrong. I ran over and I could see an emaciated form with wings is crawling towards the house. I pulled my weapon on it as we examine it, and it's a young boy, maybe 12, 14 years old. He looks up to me, and my brothers, he looks him right in the eye and asks for us to help his mom. We can hear voices and see a few flashlights moving, but not much else in the woods. I immediately turn to my brothers and say, "Get him in the house." They ask me what I'm going to do. I said, "I'm going to go do what I'm trained to do." They looked at each other as I turned away, but I know they knew what I was saying. Switching off my light, I took off into the woods. This is my backyard, and I'm up here 3-4 times a week, so I know exactly where I can and can't go. Soon enough, I break through most of the foliage, and I can see flashlights shining on one spot in particular. I try to be as quiet as possible as I move through, and I could hear voices yelling at someone not to, "Don't give me any more trouble." Then I could hear someone get struck hard. Getting closer, I hid, and I yell, "You're trespassing. Leave quietly, or you don't leave at all." This definitely got their attention, and the lights moved all the way around, and they couldn't see me because I was hidden right behind one of the big oak trees. I made sure I wasn't sticking out at all. All they would do is see the bark of the tree. But then I heard the woman scream, and she screamed, "Help me, please." That's when I saw all of those flashlights turn back to her. Then I turn around the tree and I drop two of the bastards before they even knew what's happening. The third turned towards me, but I blinded him with my light and put 4 bullets straight into his chest. Turning back to the woman still on the ground, I had to turn my flashlight away because this thing is really bright and I was probably blinding her. Though, even with the light a little bit away, I was surprised at what I saw. She was extremely, light in the skin. She was blonde. Well, blonde white hair. It was crazy. And the eyes. The eyes seemed to glow in the light, almost like the way a cat's eyes glow in the dark. I went up to her and I realized that she looked like hell. I put my hand down to her and simply said, "Come with me if you want to live." She reached out to grab my hand, and I went very slow to pick her up. But even before she got to her feet, she began asking about her son. I told her that he was all right, and we began to walk out as she leaned on me. The first man who was there was not actually dead yet, and he tried to move. I could hear him moving as he went and tried to draw his pistol out. I ran over real quick and kicked it away, fully intending to let the critters finish him off tonight. With 3 rounds in the torso, he wasn't able to get up, but he did speak. You won't get away with this. You won't possibly get away." I simply said, "Sure I will. I'm a farmer. That means I got a gun, a backhoe, and an alibi." When we got back, things had calmed down as I told everybody to go get some sleep. We need to look at everything here with clear eyes. I would stay up on guard. We made sure that the young boy got something to eat along with his mom and definitely got some water in them as they were severely dehydrated. I don't understand why. The creek was maybe 50 meters away from them, but it didn't matter. As I was pulling guard, I wandered around the house, and by that I mean I wandered around the outside of the house as well. The thing is, as my feet wandered, so did my mind. They say that the distortion has been limited to what we have now. Thinking about it, I chuckle as I wonder if this is real life or is this just fantasy? I stop laughing, though, as another thought enters my mind. What if this isn't the only distortion we have to deal with?